So all good things must come to an end, and the cyclones also end up decaying or transition into extratropical cyclones and then disappear eventually. Um, well, is cyclone a good thing or not? Actually, as I think mentioned already in another podcast, uh, Taiwan right now is facing very severe droughts because last year, a La Nina year, uh, it didn't get a single typhoon hit, and typhoons are essential for filling its reservoirs. And if you have a whole year with no typhoons, then they end up with a drought the following year. So cyclones are part of the energy transport from the equator to the pole that is needed for energy balance. Plus, they are part of balancing water and bringing rain to many of the regions, which is essential over the year. So we already talked about what happens to the cyclones after landfall. So the end of the cyclone typically comes either from landfall, in which case the energy source is cut off and it then begins to fall apart and disappear, can hit rough patches like forests and mountains and other things. It can also transition to the extratropics where the sea surface temperatures drop below 26 degree centigrade, the critical threshold for the heat content needed to energize the cyclone. Or it can have a dry air intrusion based on where it's going and what circulation exists in the environment. And what else? Yeah, it can transition to extratropical cyclone. So looking again at Hurricane Rita on 25th and 26th, 2005. Here's the Gulf of Mexico, combination of SSMI and infrared. And you can see again here, it's gone off now onto the ocean and basically fallen apart. Okay, so Rita had decayed to 18 meter per second peak surface winds and minimum central pressure of 983 hectopascal by the time this image was taken at 1200 UTC on 25th September and 26th September here. Okay, that's kind of the fate of many cyclones. We can look at more examples, but you get the idea of what happens at the end of the life cycle. They do become cold core cyclones if they transition into an extratropical cyclone like this, where the symmetry is gone and then you have this westward tilt and the sharp fronts and so on. Let's look at a couple of examples of hurricanes that did, or typhoons, cyclones that did become super typhoons and major hurricanes. This is one that held the record for a long time. Super typhoon Tip in 1979, the most intense tropical cyclone on record when this book was written, but I think since then Typhoon Haiyan and Goni have probably beaten this record by now. Haiyan happened in 2013 and Goni happened in 2020. So looking here, Super Typhoon Tip was legendary for its spatial extent as well as its intensity. Most North Pacific basin appeared to be rotating. At its most intense, the minimum sea surface pressure of Tip was measured at 870 hectopascal. And at 0353 UTC on 12th October 1979, the estimated maximum wind speed over 1 minute surface wind was 85 meter per second, 305 kilometer per second. Imagine that, okay? It's going to blow most of the things out of the water. Here is a satellite image showing the Super Typhoon Tip at its peak strength. Huge, massive storm, and surprisingly it was right behind Typhoon Sarah. So you can imagine how much energy there is in the system, that a typhoon has just gone by and another super typhoon forms. These figures, some of them I took from Wikipedia. Sorry, I forgot to put the link. This is for scale. You can look at the size of Super Typhoon Tip. Occupies a large part of the US, and there is a the smallest tropical cyclone, Tracy, which is a tiny, like a scale of Dallas, Fort Worth, for example. Okay. The other major hurricane example is Wilma from 2005, and I suspect it still stands, but you can look up, others may have beaten it by now also. The most intense in the Western Hemisphere, at least at the time the book was published. So here you can see the image. Major Hurricane Wilma at peak intensity at 1400 UTC, 19 October 2005. At this time, Wilma had a central pressure of 882 hectopascal and peak 1 minute surface wind speed of 80 meter per second, which is also around 290 or so kilometer per hour, making it a strong category 5 on Saffir-Simpson scale. Okay, so if you want to read a little bit, 3 days after forming in the northwestern Caribbean Sea, I'll see the track in a minute, and gradually intensifying, Wilma went through an unprecedented intensification cycle from 953 hectopascal to 901 hectopascal between 2310 UTC on 18 October to 0433 UTC 19 October. So very short time period, it had a massive rapid intensification. A rate of almost 10 hectopascal per hour drop. 10 hectopascal per hour drop. Massive strengthening of the eye and the eye wall. Around 1200 UTC, 19 October 2005, Wilma attained its record-setting Category 5 intensity with maximum 1 minute 10 meter winds of 82 meter per second, 295 kilometers per hour, with 882 hectopascal minimum central pressure, 6 HPA lower than the previous record of 888 HPA in Hurricane Gilbert in 1988. Okay, so oops, why did I do that? Okay, here is Wilma forming in the Caribbean Seas, rapidly intensifying. Look at this ramping up, and then it went off, lived a full life, and went off and became extratropical cyclone in waters off of Canada. I'm sorry about that. And here is Major Hurricane Wilma at 1630 UTC on 21st October 2005. 2005 was a super strong hurricane season that set a record, and 2020 matched it. At this time, Wilma has a central pressure of 926 hectopascal and peak 1 minute surface wind speeds of 60 meters per second, making it a Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. So you can see the nice spiral bands, a well-formed eye, and a solid eye wall on 21st October. Okay, end of a cyclone. Landfall, breaking apart, dry air intrusion, weakening and disappearing, oceans getting cold, transition to extratropical cyclone, and so on. And not every hurricane gets to be a major hurricane or a super typhoon, super cyclone, and so on. But the question is, with oceans warming, with atmosphere becoming more humid, with the tropics expanding, and the changes in the winds, what is happening to cyclones? We will see that more of the cyclones that are born are reaching major categories. So total number may not go up, but the mantra is that there will be more intense cyclones.